Welcome, everyone.
Hi, everybody. Hi, Renee.
Look at all these beautiful windows. All right. Well, we're so excited you're all here. And we're so thrilled to have Barbara here. And I'm going to let Barbara take it from here.
I'm excited too. My heart is racing. I brought my bear for good luck. Hi, everybody. Oh, so everybody's can hear me? I'm so happy to be here. Sarah is going to be in charge of our slideshow. I'm going to be reading you stories from my first two books, Big Horse Woman and Maggie, which were just published last week. And this is the first public reading, so you guys are lucky. Good. You can start the slides. Thank you, Sarah. Egde wangide dati te uda, ijaje wita te Barbara Salvatore. Panka ablim Magghie, waganze panka ie ablim. Hello, everybody. It's good that you're here. My name is Barbara Salvatore. I am not Panka. I'm a Panka language teacher. And my interest in the language began with these stories because I wanted to be able to name the plants the way Big Horse Woman would have. All of the material is copyrighted, so just keep that in mind. If you want copies of any of this material, you can email me at bighorsewomanbooks@gmail.com. That's bighorsewomanbooks@gmail.com. Next. And the first book in the series is Big Horse Woman, Shange Tonga Wa'u. And the second book in the series we pick up with Maggie. Next. Who is a daughter of German immigrants in Conestoga Valley, Pennsylvania. And they both have a relationship and knowledge of healing plants. This is dedicated to the Panka and the Niobrara, to the heart of everything that is, and to the dreams we follow that change us forever. Next. This is my daughter riding her horse, Fred. In 2003, we lived on a 110-acre farm in the Catskills of New York, and using draft horses, we're beginning to develop it as an organic herb farm when I was run over and crushed in a horse farming accident. Since then, I committed instead to planting my seeds with words, pictures, and stories. My fingertips can plant as many seeds as I dare to share. Next. Stories are seeds. My stories focus on the relationship of women and earth, journeying back and forward and listening as we work with our hands in the dirt. Water Willow is born to the Ponca tribe under the Great Shooting Star Shower of 1833. Next. And this is an actual print from the newspapers at that time. While digging roots and tubers, next, on the spring banks of the Niobrara, Water Willow hears the cries of a drowning colt and rescues it. When the colt grows stronger and bigger than any horse the Ponca have ever seen, they name her Big Horse Woman, Shange Tonga Wa'u. Maggie Wilder leads a simple life with her German parents in Conestoga Valley, Pennsylvania. Her mother teaches her plants and medicines, and from her father, she learns to work with draft horses and drive teams. When Mormon pioneers winter over in her valley, it changes everything, forcing her to flee her home and head west with her team of big horses. When she crosses the Nevada with her wagon train, she loses her colt tied to the wagon back in a flash flood. It is this colt that Big Horse Woman found. Big Horse Woman and Magghie are seed savers and medicine carriers from different cultures with a common purpose, both raised with the directive and instinct to be guardians of the plants, keepers of the seed, and providers of medicine their people will need. Certain trees, and this is the introduction to Big Horse Woman, Shange Tonga Wa'u. Certain trees, certain animals are yours to keep, those you are born by. The willow, the horse, the ears-up dog are my kind. I carry the ermine at my waist, morning rain at my fingertips. Willow talks to me, soothing. There is no sadder tree, no better trunk to cry on. She drinks up tears, and they flow through her roots deep in sandy water. So it always was with me, the Huwing, water willow. I thought myself one of them, being so named Willow from birth, and I was the willow for my people. If I had not been born there, then under that tree, those stars, only Spirit knows I would never been able to bend to the times that were coming. So I was, born under a twin red willow tree on the west bank of the Nishude. The sky was full of shooting stars, showering in every direction. So they say. Yes, I saw them, the changing stars that saw my way to earth. I would say that birth is very much like seeing stars. It was for me. I landed among the people at the beginning of cold weather on a cold, snow-covered night. The Huwin, they called me. Water willow, I was called. You would have thought they'd name me for the stars, but the stars are sacred. Hube. They, the stars, our ancestors, our babies, our unborn. No, grandmother gave me the name of the tree. The tree gave me its ears and voice. Next. Seed carrier, Wamidein. Her mother held her, touched her lips with sacred water, nursed her, welcomed her. Her grandmother named her. In the early days, every woman carried seed for their families, for their village, for the tribe, but not every woman knew to carry the seeds of medicine. Those that did carried these seeds wherever they went. Rainwalking was such a seed carrier. Nanjimonding carried the seed of every medicine that crossed their path. When her daughter, Kandahiwing, gave birth, there and then, Nanjimonding recognized water willow as one. Rainwalking had the seeds of knowing to pass on, and she saw that water willow would be fertile ground. She saw in this new child the heart and hands to carry seeds. She whispered to her new granddaughter, Witushpa, for every medicine there is a plant. For every plant there is a seed. For every people a seed carrier. And thus she blessed her. This next chapter is called Moons, Nyambama. People knew the earth's smells and tastes on which their lives depended, knew when something was ready to be planted, plucked, dug, tracked, or hunted. The naming of their days, of their moons, reflected this. Each moon was named for food, or lack of it. She was born at the beginning of cold weather. The next full moon brought snow and frozen water. Deer pawed the snow in search of food under a hungry hardship moon. When geese came back, trees popped free of ice. The sore eyes moon signaled the end of glaring snow. With rains came tender grass. They planted under the moon spring begins, when leaves held potent medicine. Hot weather and they dug nugtha. As the green corn grew, so the buffalo fattened. Prairie roses bloomed in the middle of summer and they picked chokecherry, corn in silk with the moon of ripening. When all leaves had color, elk bellowed at the moon. Then they stored food in caches to prepare again for the beginning of cold weather. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with the moon cycles and the changes they make in our farming plans. Ruby dawn, ambakangejide, almost there, the day red. Mullen, sinihi, foot sore plant. With this chapter and the next, I'm just going to give you an idea of how the stories are woven into these books and how the reader learns about the plants that grow on the peripheries or that we see as weeds, but truly are nature's medicines. Dew-covered mullein hugged the sloping hillside, its large rosette next. I forgot to cue you, Sarah, sorry. It's the next one. Oh, that's the changing moons. There we go. And the next one. The padded leaves blanketed each other as they unfolded. She could see this plant was still dreaming, visibly soft with sleep. She approached it, focused on the inner leaves, lush with pillows of memories. She thought of the countless times mullein leaves lined her moccasins, aiding her footsore and weary treks. She loved mullein, remembering when she'd fallen off her pony, when grandmother had held cool, wet hide scraps against her bruises, alternating them with steaming mullein leaves. She saw the mullein taproot, white and hard, like bone, like a knuckled root. The mullein flower that opened her ears when they ached next. The tightly bundled inner leaves that held morning water, held the clinging breath of each new day. Drinking it in now, she listened to the mullein song. With my root stand tall, with my leaf make smoke, with my flower clear your ears, with my seed heal down deep. It was this, she remembered, this song she heard and knew as she knelt and gratefully drank the morning's mullein dew. The next one is called Morning Forage, Hanganche Wabahi, early morning to graze. Big Horsewoman walked with her hard ash root digger in hand, scanning the forest and clearings around her as the sun rose in the sky. The earth warmed beneath her. Dew dried from the grasses but clung to the shade plants. Further on, she sat on a hill, sloped under the morning sun, gathering those plants she knew. She murmured soft prayers during her gathering, looked carefully before removing leaf or stem, made offerings of cornmeal and tobacco, knew that if she did not choose wisely, harm to the cycle of plants, birds, animals, and people would soon be measured. Only then, after offering, would she scratch, smell, lick it, sometimes chew. She knew plants by the print of their veins, a map of identity. A flower's petal, thinner than the skin of a newborn mouse, had the same force of life pulsing through it. Smells were the voice. The smell of one thing was never like another, each so uniquely given, as true of taste. A taste told everything. Each new leaf and flower, every smell and taste told something. Tightly spiraled ferns collected in a coiled basket, First-year burdock and plantain leaves lay flat in a parfleche. Bunches of field mint, bee balm, goldenrod, horsetails, yarrow feathers, all hung dying on a nearby branch. Big Horsewoman saw more plants on that hill which she'd never seen before. In recent years past, she found many medicines and foods that her people had never used. Her discoveries were sometimes shared clan to clan and tribe to tribe. Others were kept her secrets, these plants from another world. Today, as she dug a handful of familiar windflower roots and shook the dirt, a new smell came to her, rich and deep from within the freshly dug earth. She closed her eyes, inhaled, and tried to identify the earthy scent, but did not recognize it. Next, when she opened her eyes, they focused on a thick patch of curly-edged leaves nearby, new to her. She remembered her grandmother's words. When a plant grows so abundant, Magghie, or a new one comes in crowds on the wind, from the waters in the path of travel, it is often a gift to the people that they don't yet know they need. It has happened before, and many plants tell us now. Something new comes our way. You will see. Watch and learn. You will know. Weshbahantaninke. Dark root. Jonkonzi root, yellow. Big Horsewoman heard it whispering, dig a little deeper, my roots follow the dark. Her fingers, chilled in the deep earth, followed the root, exploring its length. She wriggled her wrist, scraped her fingernails deep into the dirt. As fingers worked through the darkness below, she crouched closer to the earth and pressed her cheek against it. The smell of baking clay wafted from the hole to her nostrils. She removed enough of the surrounding dirt so that she had all fingers of both hands wrapped firmly around the root and slowly extracted it like a strong, stubborn tooth. Pushing clumps of caked earth back, she refilled the gaping hole. She kept the plant in the shadow of her tunic as she carried it whole to the stream. Only then did she expose it to the light and look long at it. Next. You moved me, the root spoke. You called me, Big Horsewoman answered. She lowered the root in the cold water to quench its thirst. Then its whispering continued. Next. We've arrived crossing the muddy water on skirts, hems, and fur. We've covered hills and filled ditches. This is a wave, as happens, be it air, land, or water, the breaking wave of trampling wheels, feet, and horses, heavy with seed clinging, carried away on new trails under the fullest moon, sinking deep from blue skirts here to root. Big Horsewoman curled her toes in the dirt and thanked the earth. Now we're going to transition over to Magghie. If you can go to the next slide, Sarah. And this is in her voice, the introduction to her. I, Magghie Wilder, dedicate this to Hans Wilder, May Wilder, my mother and father. There is no need to remember them that went ahead. I will always know them and cannot forget, so need not have to remember. Always they are there in the air around me, in the leaves and grass, in the hair standing up on the horses' backs. Next. Here they are in my words on this page. They still stride before my eyes, and if only I could draw a line as swiftly as a thought, they would be dancing live in front of yours. They would be a picture any eye could plainly see. My mother and my father were known to me, known to the land they walked on, known to the horses, known to the trees. Otherwise, they kept almost entirely to themselves. But I shan't do that. Cannot keep them to themselves. In words and pictures, I will draw them out for everyone to see, and yes, remembered they will be. Maggie was the only child of an industrious German couple who arrived in northern Pennsylvania with a small fortune to start them off. By the time Maggie was born, they had developed an orderly and prosperous farm, cleared hundreds of acres, plowed and cultivated using their teams of strong and solid drafts. Their horse stock was well chosen, well bred, and impeccably trained by Maggie's father, Hans. For Maggie, they were perfect friends. Next. Before Maggie was 12, she could drive a team of 2 or 4 and ride any of the wide-backed geldings and mares. She covered ground on the back of a big horse. Maggie could catch flutterbys and dragonflies and frogs underwater with her bare hands and name practically every plant living around her. She filled baskets with blackberries, raspberries, mulberries, barberries, strawberries, bilberries, rose hips, stream pebbles, flower blossoms, honey mushrooms, caterpillars, salamanders, and wild flowers. Maggie climbed the twisting fruit trees that her father had planted long before she was born, gathered plums and peaches, shook the apples sweetly ripened from their branches. She competed with squirrels for nuts. Maggie mostly talked to herself, talked as well to the horses, trees, bugs, and flowers, chatted through the garden as she weeded and dug for carrots. Her world was perfectly normal, with nothing else to compare it to. She never knew to feel lonely. Wild yams wove through patches of potatoes, rows of old world turnips, giant parsnips, cabbage, carrots, sugar beets. Hills of pumpkins and squash spread under pole beans growing up corn. Tangled hedges separated. Acres of alfalfa, lucerne, legumes, and clovers. Fields of oats, barley, English rye, and German wheat grew beside sloping hills of flax and sorghum. Narrow deer trails crisscrossed the hills, cutting edges into ridges. Turkeys flocked in the woods. Hans Wilder's was the most prosperous, well-managed farm in the region. Less fortunate immigrant families were attracted to the valley in the hopes of reaping such abundance. Maggie's father leased them sufficient land to farm in exchange for a fair portion of their hay and crops. His holdings sprawled across the hills. The hay fields, cropped 3 times a season, were stacked and forked into the barn lofts for winter fodder. In the heat of summer, the horses and tenant cows grazed the cool, untamed northern hills, gradually planting grass further with their manure. In winter, the big horses emptied the lofts, heating their own barn in the process. Maggie spent long winter days brushing them, warming her hands in their breath. In exchange for a needed skill or added strength, Hans sometimes rented closer quarters to transients. Their best masons came and went that way. They left when their work was done with only the stone barn and house, evidence of their former presence. Thus, Maggie was regarded as a rich man's daughter. She was not aware of this since she spent all of her life with her parents, there being no other surviving children in her home and none alive on the tenant farms who had time or want enough to play with her. They'd been told that her mother was a witch, and they were not to speak to her. Maggie sometimes watched them busy herding geese or goats over a far hill. Once they felt her stare. They always ran from sight of her, calling out in warning, "Kleine Hexe, kleine Hexe, little witch, little witch." Next slide. This is about her mother, May. May rambled in her gardens, reciting poetic lore, incantation, old wives' tales, and her own new ones. If you had half an ear to listen, you'd know more by childhood than most beings knew ever at all, and may knew if you were listening in or not. She always spoke softly when Maggie was about, knowing her daughter's ears were wide open to her. Every seedling in the garden was a known medicine or food, and any unknown newcomer was likewise precious, not to be harmed in any way. May was shy to pull anything until she had transplanted some in patches to the garden borders, where she could observe the growing cycle, discover their fitting use, and collect its seeds. Even those weeds that her father harrowed endlessly from the fields were allowed safe haven among the rows and patterns of her mother's old world herbs. Maggie, there isn't a plant living that doesn't have some secret to share, she'd say. Every plant has a food or medicine or poison, some fitting use all its own. I won't go pulling up a stranger just because I don't know it yet, especially those that come before me. They were here first. They all show clues, and you need to watch and listen to them until their secret to you is told. Next, Maggie would watch and listen until she, too, heard the whispering. And then this is towards the end of the book, and there's no slide for this one, but it's called Seeds. Maggie is preparing to leave her home. Maggie passed through the dormant gardens between dried stems, grasses, and slumbered, whispering. She walked on, not certain she would make it to the wagons already assembled on the hill. Her limbs were a cold, dead weight. They continued to move only by force. Maggie felt her mother then, heard her voice whisper, and paused on the garden path to listen. Seeds, 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 seeds. As Maggie approached the seed shed, a haunted wind blew open the hinged door. She entered the shed and it slammed shut behind her. Rustling in the breeze, plants called to her from the eaves. The steady dripping from her skirts counted the seconds that she spent staring, listening. She had to hurry. She gathered all the aprons and frocks off pegs by the door, grabbed all the gloves and rags off the potting shelf. She grabbed the barrel of hand tools. She pulled medicines and seeds, both rare and common. She threw pokes, pouches, bags, and packets of herb and flower seed into big burlap sacks. From the old Dutch oven, she took armfuls of sacked crop seed she and May had separated just last week. 2 bags of every kind. Later on the trail, she dreams this on the first night. Garden dream. Next. Maggie curled up by a large mossy boulder and stared up at the moon. The steam rose up from the cup in her hands. She inhaled, sipped, began to dream. She closed her eyes to better see, to better hear their voices. Gardens. Yes, Mama. We will start with small gardens planted in crescents and circles like the moon under the stars, paths weaving like snakes in the grass. No, Papa, not measured rows just yet. Yes, plant enough for over winter, I will. Enough until we learn the new ways of the place. Yes, Papa, plant only some of the seeds, saving the rest in case it does not yield. Yes, of course I will save some of every kind. Can you see it then, Mama? The gardens in beautiful bloom, curly mint and cabbage, sweet carrots, peas and chives, peppers and potatoes, rosemary gardens, bean blossoms, squash protecting corn, beans growing up stalks. Queen Anne's lace at the edges. Next, white man's foot in the paths, as sure as our tracks. Papa, woodland meadows will lead to open prairies, wide plains, waves of grass. Mama, the flowers will change, but we can still make garden borders bright with your blue flowers under the bottomless blue sky. Barrage, lupines, delphinium, bluebells, cornflowers, and yes, your favorite, Papa, forget-me-nots. Yes, Mama, their true name being remember-me's. Lavender slopes, strawberry hills, the smell of clover. Next, goldenrod fields, sage and catnip, bee balm, valerian, lobelia, and humblebees drunk with sedative nectar, buzzing secrets to each other. Hives and honey? Of course there will be bees. Without bees, there would be no flowers, no fruit, no animals, no food, no life. Of course they will have bees, of one kind or another. She wished that they'd had time to properly pack and move their hives. And yet, as she drifted in sleep, she saw the gardens, visibly dreamed them, new and dancing, filled with bees. So that's the end of the storytelling session. And I'm just going to give you a quick introduction to myself and how the stories came to be. And then I think we'll have time for questions and response, Sarah? Yeah? Okay. L'été a tombé et the home the hundi. I saw this in a dream. Next. In mid-November 1995, I dreamt a Ponca woman covered from neck to hips with pouches and seed bags riding a big horse packed with seed sacks and parfleches across a tall grass prairie. A dog with ears up trotted at our heels, trailing over pine ridges to a flat hilltop. A valley spanned out below in spiral patterns, flowers fanning, gardens and crops circling and snaking through abandoned earth mounds. On the ground, a woman in a faded blue dress, knees tucked under her, was bent to planting seeds, focused on her task. Behind her, a ribbon of shining water ran beneath steep limestone cliffs. The woman in the garden turned her head to look up, the dog barked, and I woke up. I had no idea who these women were, but their story took hold of me and never let go. I wanted to know who I was in the dream, why she saved seeds, where she was going, how she named the plants, the places, the people. Who was the woman in the blue dress planting seeds in circles? I followed the clues they laid out for me, and eventually they led me to Niobrara, down the road to their whole story, and their story led me to mine. I wrote for the plants. Next. The women's knowledge of healing plants and their mutually obsessive need to save the seeds of food and medicine is a thread that runs through all these stories. This common cause led to their meeting, rooted their friendship, and guided me in recording their stories as they spoke them. The Ponca call the plants the silent nation because they don't have a voice to speak for themselves. But some of us hear them, and Big Horsewoman and Magghie speak for the plants, stand for the plants, and protect them, and teach us how to listen. I became a student of the Ponca language because it became essential to me to name the plants as she would have. I learned how the language reflects the ways and views of the people who speak it. My intention also is that these stories contribute to the revitalization of the language through this use of Ponca names. Next, this is blue corn from a 140-year-old bundle that was recovered in Oklahoma of blue Ponca corn seed. Next. Their big story became an opus woven in and out of my own life, braiding dream, imagination, and reality in and out of experience. From that first morning on, I regarded them as real, tracking their stories, cultures, their time and place. Like Magghie, I too was run over by my horse-drawn vehicle. Next, my pelvis, knee, and shoulder broken in what my then 13-year-old daughter would call an attempt to take my research too far. Being flattened forced me to settle down to the keyboard, and the women's voices filled every silence as they fine-tuned their story and fed me detail. Next, an urgency crept into my bones, getting me ready for when I could walk. With every step, their knowledge, experience, lessons, discoveries, and memories become ours, and their journey yours. Ride on, sisters. Next, I just like to acknowledge and thank every day under the sun and moon. I thank the plants for their voices, lessons, love, and nourishment. Thank you to the Ponca, Omaha, and Lakota language and culture teachers and friends who have welcomed and taught me. Thank you to these Ponca homelands. Thank you to my family, next, and my horses. Thank you to our ancestors who have placed all seeds of hope in us. And this slide is just a demonstration. On the first summer, we got our horses. This is Fred and my daughter Ruby. And it was the 4th of July. He was afraid of fireworks, so she went out in her nightgown to calm him down. That became my first sketch of Big Horse Woman, and then became the painting that's on the cover of the novels. Next. This is my horse Barney, who has the most expressive eyes. Sometimes I called him Eeyore because he always looked like this. Next. And here I am with Barney and his brother Fred. I also wanted to mention to people that if you go to my website, bighorsewoman.com, there's /events is one page that has podcasts called Plant Stories, Life Medicines. We're in conversation with Bob Hendrickson on KZUM in Lincoln. We talk about 4 or 5 different plants every month, and I interweave stories about the plants such as this. And it's really a fun podcast, which they've given me permission to put on my public website. And that's bighorsewoman.com. Next. These are the covers of the books. They just came out on Amazon last week. It's a 25-year journey coming to fruition, and this has been a really nice way to kick off my public readings. It's been wonderful. And now we're going to close with just if anybody has responses, questions, answers. Thank you so much. Leave the hall. Anybody's welcome to turn on their mic and ask questions or respond in any way. Oh, I'm seeing the chat now. Oh, somebody loved Magghie, the illustration. Yeah, that was my horse Barney, and my daughter Ela, when she was 9 years old, I dressed her up in a prairie dress. Please say again the original lands of the Ponca. I knew some living in Oklahoma long after they were driven from their homelands. That's a question from Linda Luttrell. The Ponca homelands, history teaches that they came from the eastern woodlands up the Ohio River, and on the Missouri River there are 5 tribes: the Ponca, Omaha, Osage, Kaw, Quapaw, and Oto, Missouri. They're all called Legiha, which translates into the people. When they moved upriver of the Missouri, they separated from the Omaha in the 1600s. The Omaha, that word actually means upstream people, and the Ponca went further west and settled on the Niobrara, which is originally a Ponca word, Niobrara. And they went as far west as the Black Hills, the and further towards the homelands of the Crow and Cheyenne and the Lakota. But then they came back, and these homelands where the Niobrara River and Missouri River join were their chosen place to stay. And it's where they were removed from in, I think it was 1890, forced to march to Oklahoma through hailstorms and wind, lost a third of their population, another third to malaria the first year they were in Oklahoma. And then Standing Bear is famous for returning with about 30 of his people and the bones of his son, because he'd made a promise to bury him in the homelands. And when he returned, he was arrested, but he had allies who helped him in court. And at that court trial, he spoke up for himself as being a human being with the same color blood as you or anyone, and that God saw him as a human being as he would anyone else. And the judge declared through that trial that the Indian was a person. So it was the first time Indians had the right of habeas corpus. And as a result of that, there's about 4,000 to 5,000 Ponca in Nebraska and throughout the country that are enrolled in the Ponca tribe of Nebraska. The Ponca tribe of Oklahoma has between 5,000 and 6,000 members, again, mostly in Oklahoma, but also throughout the country. And also these were homelands to the Omaha, the Lakota, the Santee, the Dakota, the Santee Sioux. The Ho-Chunk sometimes came this far west. They're known as the Winnebago. But I live just 12 miles from the Niobrara River, so it's a dream come true. Oh, someone loved Sarah Brubacher's here. Hi, Sarah. I love you. She's in Nebraska too. She says my voice. She loved the different voices and illustrations. Thank you, Sarah. And thank you to Whitney. She liked the storytelling. Is there anybody who wants to speak up? My voice is getting a little hoarse. Don't be shy. We have another 10 minutes or so.
I love that you kind of give instructions on how to save seeds and how to, and that you make it okay that we talk to the plants.
Yes, right? Yeah.
We do that.
Yeah. Ever since I was little, I've done that. And I just thought, you know, there's things you do when you're little that you think are normal until somebody says, oh, you're weird. But yeah, even when people say, oh, that's weird, I really, really encourage people to be open and not to question their intuitive thoughts. One time I met toadflax for the first time. It's also called butter and eggs. It's a cute little plant that has spindly leaves and little, it's related to domesticated plants, snapdragons. It's a wild snapdragon. And the color of it is like egg yolks. And my daughter at the time had eczema on her cheeks. And I saw this plant for the first time and said, I wonder if I could make a salve that would be good for her skin. And then I went and looked it up because this was before internet. My rule was I had to find it in 6 books or I wouldn't use it on my children. So I went and looked up this toadflax and it was a remedy for skin diseases and rashes. And I made a salve and her rash went away. So, you know, and then the other thing is too, is oftentimes you don't notice a plant at all until you're going through your herb guide or something and you say, oh, like bloodroot, I'd never seen in my life. And then I kept seeing it in books and thinking what an incredible plant, the way it grows and it hugs its own leaf and the flower delicately comes up and then the seeds burst off in the distance. But it's such a delicate and like nurturing plant. I was so struck by the photos and images I saw of it. It was a week later that I was driving down a road I'd driven down hundreds of times. And I saw it low growing in the forest floor. And I thought, you know, that helps to bring your awareness too. Your curiosity is the greatest teacher and will lead you to those plants that you need to befriend. So I'm sure some of you have stories like that. I'd love to hear any other stories from other people about their communication with plants or their saving of seeds or working with bees. I like your poster, Angie. Are those all insects?
It is a poster showing all the different animal and plant life around a wetland. And it was a series of posters that Mark Mueller made in Iowa. The Iowa Department of Ag and I'm forgetting my acronyms, but like their rural life department gave them out at this fair one year. So I got them for free.
Nice.
For teachers.
It's an appropriate background for today. And thank you for your comment, Renee. Does anybody else have a story they want to share? I'm looking at the chat again. A great kickstart from Liz for your new books and public readings, and a beautiful ending for a powerful conference. I agree. I agree. It felt really nice to meet new faces, to listen to the work that everyone is doing, the journeys that you all are on.
I'll add another comment of praise since nobody else is. They just are in their hearts, right? Yes, there's one of their hearts. That you make, you let us come to peace with invasive, what's called invasive species and travelers, and that you parallel the Native woman and the German woman, and talk about those bridges and complementary habits that we have. I've realized that my mother and her mother, who came from Sweden, were plant knowers, and I wish they had connected with Ojibwa, whose land they
Anishinaabe, yeah. I'm really, really happy that you're pointing that out, because that was generally a thread and theme that I wanted to make evident. And, you know, I have some environmental friends who are landscapers, and they really concentrate on planting and bringing back native plants, but they have an animosity to the travelers and the invasives, like you say. And so often plants, like grandmother says, come in abundance because that's what we need. Like kudzu in the South is going crazy. And then they found out it's a remedy for alcoholism and addiction. So what perfect plant to grow during the opioid epidemic, you know? Or dock seed being, all farmers complaining about dock taking over their fields, which is why I wanted to choose that for tonight, because it's the highest form of iron supplement we can get in any North American plant. It's the best cure for anemic people. It's very, very, I discovered it when I was pregnant with my first daughter and was very tired and fatigued all the time, and the midwife suggested a yellow dock tincture, and it helped me immediately. Within a week I felt improvement of spirit and mood. So there is a fine line between saying, you know, naming a boundary in your life and in your yard or on your farm with a plant, but at the same time, each and every one, as both Maggie and Big Horse Woman and grandmother express, each and every one has a gift. And if it's not nourishing us, it's nourishing another insect or animal or bird or something wild that is, they all grow up in relation to everything else. So we have to keep that in mind with each and every plant. Thank you for pointing that out and for gleaning that from the stories. I'm just adjusting. So because I got run over by the manure spreader, which is a really crappy story, I lived most of my life in a nest and rearranged the pillows accordingly. So thank you for understanding that. And Sarah, I really hope you turn your mic on. I see you, Sarah Bubacker.
Yeah, hi Barbara. It's so good to see you and hear you. I just love how yeah, how you incorporate that like healing knowledge and plant knowledge with stories, right? Because that's just how our human memory works, right? As we attach
Yes.
it to stories, to our own personal experiences. And so
Yes.
just as a herbalist, I'm just like so happy and I can't wait to read your books.
Yay. And that's so true. Like, you know, there's one example in the story where Big Horse falls and gets a gash in his fetlock, and she uses plantain leaves and poultice to stop the bleeding. And any child or adult will remember that from the story because they're invested in Big Horse and what happens to him and will he bleed, and you know, and they will remember. But I can tell you until I'm blue in the face, plantain will stop bleeding, and people will come back a week later. What's that plant you said that would stop bleeding? You know, but when they have the story and can look back, then they'll remember, you know. So thank you for picking that up. That was really important to me. And Sarah has a farm. What's the name of the town?
Yeah, it's outside of Cambridge, Nebraska, and it's called Sky Chief Springs because it was dedicated a century ago to the Pawnee chief, Sky Chief, where he and the Pawnee used to camp on their buffalo hunt, summer buffalo hunt. So.
Yes, and you know, that's really giving back to name it in honor of him and that history. So I can't wait to visit you there someday.
Yes, yes, please.
Leave the home.
Thank you.
So thank you so much. This was Beyond Spirit and All, Amy Kay. Spirit and love and love filled and just perfect. I intended, this is from Piper, an intuitive tincture building class recently, and it is so beautiful what can happen when we let ourselves be open to intuitive healing. Yes, thank you for underlining that. You know, again, too, it doesn't have to happen in the presence of plants. Sometimes you might have a dream about a plant, you know, see in detail the branches of a certain tree or the roots moving through the earth. And, you know, pay attention to those. I keep a little notebook, one of those little pocket notebooks under my pillow, literally, with a pen. And I wake up with dreams, and you know, you so much as open your eyes and often they'll shatter, or you're like grasping for the threads of them. So since I was 13, I've kept a journal where I write down dreams. And that is a good way to, you know, your first morning thoughts or the ones that you have as you're drifting off to sleep. That's a good way to keep those ideas alive, because you most likely won't remember them a day or so later. So this is the end of the conference, a wonderful conference. People are saying, Sarah, they loved it. And Piper, all the hard work. And Renee, I'm sorry I missed your book talk. Yesterday, I had trouble getting on Hova. I finally managed to load it onto my phone in the evening. And then I sent a lot of panic texts and emails to Sarah and Piper today. They helped me write out. So here we are, it worked. If there are no more questions, I don't know if you will be able to hear this, but I'm going to play. This is a powwow song. Can you hear it?
No.
Now?
No. Sometimes you have to click. Let's see.
Barbara, is it a link to something that I could click on and share it? I can share the sound.
It's a YouTube.
If you put it in the chat, I can share it with the group, or we can pass
Okay.
it on and folks can listen.
Yes,
we
I'll put it in the
close.
chat and you can listen later.
Perfect.
At the Ponca Powwow, they have a women's singers round, and it's one of my absolute favorites. So, here we go, chat. And it will just keep the spirit going if you listen to this song.
Well,
And it
thank
was
you so,
taken at powwow last year.
thank you so much. I'm gonna share it with everyone here and pull it up on your own. And what a great way to keep this conference after we close. Thank you so much, Barbara, and thank you to everyone for attending. This is really going to stay with me for a long time. I hope others feel the same.
Oh, that's really well put. Thank you, Julie. Thank you, Piper. Thank you, all the faces I can't see. And thank you all for being such good listeners. Love you.
Bye.
Doksha. Good job, Sarah.